Hi guys, and welcome to this tutorial for the linen stitch slouchy hat. This is a hat I designed using some DK weight yarn, the linen stitch, and some single crochets. So it's a very basic stitches are used, and I have two samples here. The one on the left is made with some DK weight 100% superwash merino wool, and the one on the right is made with some Caron cupcakes, which is category 3, which is supposed to be, I guess, DK weight, but it feels more like a light worsted. In today's tutorial, I will actually be using another yarn just to show you that you can make up this hat in whatever yarn you choose. So I'm going to run you through the materials we're going to be needing for this tutorial. And let's get started. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using Caron Simply Soft Yarn. This is classified as a worsted weight, but I think it's a light worsted weight, and it's very soft. The color is bone, which I hope will help you better see the stitches and what I'm saying, as it's not a really dark yarn. You'll also be needing a 3.5mm hook as well as a 4mm hook. Pair of scissors, a tape measure, and optional, a stitch marker. So as I mentioned before, this tutorial uses some very simple stitches. And we're going to start by doing a foundation half double crochet for the brim of the hat, which you can see here. So this is the brim of our hat. That's what we're going to be starting with. And as I said, we're going to be doing a foundation half double crochet. So using our 3.5mm hook, we're going to start. Now, the way I do a foundation half double crochet is I first do a slip knot. And then I chain 3. Okay. Yarn over, go through that back bump, pull up a loop. I'm going to yarn over, pull through this first loop, so that creates the chain where I'm going to be working my subsequent half double crochets into. Then I'm going to yarn over and work a half double crochet as I normally would. If we look at our work, okay, we have this loop we created. So this chain space that we created by yarning over and pulling through one loop is the one we're going to be working into. Okay, so I'm just going to insert my hook back into the stitch. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to be working into that chain space that I showed you from before. And I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one again, and I'm going to yarn over and complete my half double crochet. So I now have 3 half double crochets because this chain 2 space that we did at the beginning counts as our first half double crochet. 1 and 2, so this is a total of 3 half double crochets. I'm going to repeat this until I have 10 half double crochets. Alright, so I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook into that chain space. Yarn over, pull up a loop. I'm going to yarn over, pull through one, yarn over, pull through all. Okay. So at the moment we have 9 foundation half double crochet, so I'm going to go into this last chain space and I'm going to yarn over, pull up that loop, yarn over, pull through one loop, and I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, which concludes our rows of foundation half double crochet. Right. So now that we've done that, we are going to chain 2, turn our work, and this chain 2 counts as our first half double crochet. So that means we are going to be skipping the stitch directly under the chain 2 space, which is this first half double crochet. We will not be working there because our chain 2 counts as that first half double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over and going into the back loops, ignoring this one because that's our first stitch. I'm going to go into here, the back loop of that half double crochet. I'm going to yarn over and complete a half double crochet. So again, looking at my work, this would be the front loop, which is the one closest to me, and this is going to be my back loop. So I'm going to work right there. And I'm going to keep doing that, working into the back loop of my half double crochets until I reach the end of the row. The end of the row, our final stitch would go in this chain 2 from the beginning. Don't forget that chain 2, otherwise you'll end up with 9 stitches. Right, so we are now at this final stitch, which would be the chain 2. I am not going to go into just one loop of the chain 2 because I find that creates a big hole and I don't like it. So I'm just going to go directly into that chain 2. And it can be a little bit finicky, especially if you're a tight crocheter, but just yarn over, pull up a loop, and do a half double crochet as usual. Once again, we are going to chain 2, turn our work, and we are going to once again ignore this first stitch because that is where our chain 2 is coming up from, and work into the back loop of the following stitch. Work into the back loop of this stitch. Just continue working into the back loops of the stitches until we reach the end of the row. Okay, and I have come upon this chain 2 space, which marks my first stitch. So I will work into that chain 2 space my half double crochet. Now we're going to continue repeating this pattern until we reach the desired length. So ideally we want this band to wrap around our head but still have some stretch to it. So you don't want it to wrap around your head perfectly. For me, this is between 19.5 and 20 inches. So I'm just going to keep working this half double crochet in the back loop only until I reach 19 inches. 20 inches is usually average, so that's what I suggest in the pattern. but you can just go ahead and measure it around your head, and when you know the hat will be comfortable, then you can just stop working the rows. I will meet you back here when I have those 19 inches. Once we have reached our desired length, which as I said for me was 19.5, we will fold our work with right sides facing, okay? And this will ensure that our seam will be on the inside of the hat. So I'm going to take that final loop, okay? And I'm going to insert it into the corresponding stitch on the other side. And I'm going to pull up a loop and turn my work, right? That way I don't have to cut my yarn. So I'm going to go back into the stitch, but through the back loop only instead of both loops now. It's going to be a bit difficult because the yarn is splitty. So there we are. So we go through the back loop of this one, and in the corresponding stitch we also go through the back loop. We're going to do a slip stitch. I'm going to try and do our slip stitches just a little bit on the loose side. Okay, so again I'm going into the back loop of my first stitch and into the back loop of my second stitch, and I am going to do a slip stitch going into the back loops. I sometimes find it hard working with Caron because I do find that they are really splitty yarns, but they do work out beautifully. So you win some, you lose some. But again, just going through those slip stitches, doing them loosely, and I'll meet you back here when I've seamed up all our row. So I have reached the last stitch of my row. If you kind of pull your stitch apart, you'll see what I mean by the last stitch is being a little tricky. So this was the first stitch of our foundation. So we just kind of turn the work, right? And I'm just going to seam that up as well. And the first stitch is here. It's our chain 2. That's the stitch we're going to be working into. Now in this last stitch, I'm not overly worried about making sure I just work into the back loops because they are chains, so I don't want to cause a bigger hole. Okay, so if you can see, we've seamed up, so now we turn it right side out, and you can kind of see that the seam we've done almost hides between the stitches, which is what I was looking for. All right, so oops, pulled on the wrong string there. Okay, so keeping this loop from the last single crochet we worked on raised, I'm going to let go of it, and I'm going to switch my 3.5 for my 4mm hook. Can we insert that into the loop? And we're now going to begin working our linen stitch pattern. So if you can see in our model hat, we've got our brim, which we worked in a 3.5mm hook, and then we've got the linen stitch worked into each row, and just moving on up with the linen stitch. So that's what we're going to be working on now. Remember to switch to a 4mm hook, very helpful. All right, so we're back here. We're going to chain 1 to bring up the yarn, and in this space we're going to be working a linen stitch, which is a single crochet, chain 1, and that completes our linen stitch. So into the next row I'm also going to be doing a single crochet and a chain 1. And I'm going to be doing this all the way around until I have 60 stitches. Okay, so going into that next row that I see, single crochet, chain 1. This other row, we're going to do a single crochet and a chain 1. Now, if you've got, say, 58 rows, then you'll need to increase 2 stitches just to make sure that you have your total of 60 stitches. And how we would do that is we simply are going to work 2 linen stitches in 1 chain space. Try to do this a bit spaced, so if I increased here, I'm going to go maybe 3 stitches without increasing at the next one. So just make sure they're evenly spaced, and that way your hat doesn't end up looking a little bit wonky in the back. So I'm just going to keep going until I have a total of 60 linen stitches, and then I will meet you back at the beginning. Also, a good tip that I forgot to mention is you know how many stitches you need to add to get to the 60 by just counting your rows. Okay, and that gives you a good idea of how many stitches you need to add. So right now I counted my rows and I had 54 rows to get to my 19.5 inches. This also because this yarn is just a light worsted, it's a bit heavier than the DK, but for the DK I did use 60 rows, so I just had to work 1 linen stitch into each row. But for this one, I'll just need to add 6 more stitches to complete the 60 stitches of my round. Right, so I have got my 60 stitches. I counted twice just to be sure. I'll show you a couple of places where I increased. So here there's an increase, and here there's an increase. There's an increase. Okay, so just so you know that I did do all my 60 stitches. Returning my hook to that loop of the last chain 1 space, I am now going to be working in continuous rounds. So what this means is that I won't not be joining into any of the stitches. I'm just going to keep working around and around. So this is a good time if you have a stitch marker that you want to use just so you can mark the beginning of your round always. You can use it. I just don't use it. I pay attention to where my string is, and I always try to make sure that when I reach my desired length, I have ended close to this particular string. Alright, so remember for the linen stitch, you work into your chain 1 spaces. You do not work into the single crochet, you work into the chain 1 spaces. This can be a little tricky to see. So for example, this is actually my single crochet. So between 2 single crochets, there's my chain 1 space. That's where I'll be doing my first stitch of the new round. So I'm going to do a single crochet, and I'm going to chain 1, and that completes my linen stitch. And I'm going to work right now into my second chain 1 space, which is there. So I'm going to work my linen stitch, and I'm going to chain 1 to complete that linen stitch. Okay, and I'm just going to keep repeating this all the way across until I reach 6 inches, right? So I'm going to be working in continuous rounds until I reach 6 inches. That's my desired length for the hat. If you would like a longer slouchier hat, you could go up to 7 inches as well. But me, I'm going to stop when I reach 6 inches. I'll show you that in the completed hat. So here I went up to 6 inches, and you can tell the exact spot I decreased because we switched to single crochets. That's how I'm going to work the decreases in this hat. We can compare hat sizes. You see, this is 20 inches, and this was 19.25, as close to 19.5 as I could get them. And because of the nature of this Caron yarn being a little thicker, it still worked out. All I had to do was make sure I increased and had 60 stitches. So if you like to count at the end of every row, I had recommend putting a stitch marker into the last chain space, because that's what technically marks the beginning of your next round. It's also where your slip knot from the beginning is. Alright, so as I said, I'm just going to be working in continuous rounds of linen stitch until I reach my 6 inches. I'll catch up with you guys. So I wanted to show you guys that I am at the halfway point, and we are measuring from the bottom of our brim all the way to the top. So when I say 6 inches, I do mean that you include 6 inches counting your brim. And our brim should be about 2 inches. If you can see here, that's what we've got, more or less. It's actually 1.75, but close enough to 2 inches. And then I've currently worked 2 inches of my hat. So I'm going to keep working until I get to 6 inches, or as close to 6 inches as I can get it. So it might be 6.25 when I complete that final row, but if I take that row off, it might be 5.75, so I'd rather be at the 6.25 mark if that was the case. But I already know that each stitch is about half an inch, so you should be at least, I already know that each of my linen rows of linen stitch are about 1/4 of an inch, so that also helps me work out how many rows are left in my pattern. So usually by the time we get to 6 inches, you should have 22 rows. And in the 23rd row, that's when we will start our decreases. So of course, if you want to take the hat up a bit taller, so say 7 inches, then you wouldn't really be following the row count provided, but the instructions would still remain the same because you will still have 60 stitches to decrease. So I'm going to keep working on this until I get to 6 inches, as I mentioned previously, and then I will catch you guys up. So here I have completed my 22 rows, and I'm going to measure it for you guys. And it'll be a bit more than 6 because this yarn is worsted, but it's 6 1/4, so that's close enough to 6 for me. And now I'm going to start doing the decreases. Now, as I was telling you about the previous hat, we're going to be working our decreases in single crochets. You can notice the difference in texture between the linen stitch and the single crochets up at the top. So that's what we're going to be doing now. And to work these single crochet decreases, it's really easy. I'm going to bring this up closer. So as I was saying, for rounds 23 and 24, we're going to be working 1 single crochet. Now for round 23, we're going to be working 1 single crochet into each of the chain 1 spaces. And here I actually highly recommend the use of a stitch marker that I just dropped. Okay, so I'm going to do my first stitch after having completed this linen stitch, complete with the chain 1 space. Okay, I'm going to go here and I'm going to do a single crochet. I'm going to grab my stitch marker and I'm going to mark that first single crochet. Okay, so I'm just going to continue around doing 1 single crochet into each of those chain 1 spaces. And at the end of the round, you should end up with 60 stitches. Okay, I will meet you back here after I have done 1 single crochet into each chain 1 space. So this is the last stitch of round 23, and I wanted to do this one with you guys because it's a little bit tricky. Remember that this is our last linen stitch of the previous row, which means that here we've got our last chain 1 space. So we will be working our final single crochet into this chain 1 space. And when in doubt, you can always just go ahead and count. So I just removed my stitch marker, and as I said, I'm going to do 1 single crochet into each of the single crochets. Just completed round 24, which was a single crochet round. Now I'm going to move on to round 25, and for round 25 we will be doing 1 single crochet in the first 8 stitches and then an invisible decrease. So I have just completed 1 single crochet. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And after we complete these 8 single crochets, so it's 1 single crochet in the next 8 stitches, we are going to be doing an invisible decrease. So I'm going to move angles so you guys can really see what I'm doing. So we're going to be doing an invisible decrease over these 2 stitches. So this is an invisible single crochet, so I'm just going to be pulling up that front loop and going into the next stitch and pulling up that front loop. I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to pull my yarn through, and I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops, and that completes a single crochet. I'm going to do another of this repeat with you guys, and then we'll just repeat that all the way across until we end our round. So this is 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so now we've come upon another invisible decrease. So I'm going to insert my hook into that front loop, and I'm going to insert my hook into the front loop of the other single crochet. I'm going to yarn over, pull up my yarn, and then yarn over and pull through 2. Right, so I'm going to repeat these steps, doing 1 single crochet in the next 8 stitches and another decrease all the way around, and you should end with a decrease right over these 2. So I have reached the last decrease of the round, and as I promised you, you should have been ending in a decrease. And this finishes our round 25, and we should have 54 stitches all the way around. So for round 26, we are going to be working 1 single crochet in each of the next 7 single crochets. So that's my first single crochet. I'm going to mark it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we're going to be doing an invisible decrease over the next 2 stitches, pulling up that front loop and pulling up the front loop of the other stitch. We're going to be yarning over, pulling up that loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2 to complete our single crochet. And I'm going to be repeating that all the way across. So 1 single crochet in each of the next 7 single crochets, and then a decrease over the next 2 stitches. I will meet you back here for our final decrease. It is time for our final decrease. Okay. So again, I'm just going to insert my hook into the next 2 front loops, yarn over, and complete a single crochet. So that was round 26. For round 27, we're going to be doing 1 single crochet into each of the next 6 single crochets, and then we're going to be working an invisible decrease. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to be doing an invisible decrease. So you guys may have been noticing a pattern, right? We started with 8 single crochets, then a decrease, 7 single crochets, then a decrease, and now we're down to 6 single crochets and a decrease. So for this round, we're just going to keep doing this. I'm going to be working 6 single crochets in the next 6 single crochets, and then an invisible decrease over the following 2 single crochets. And I will meet you back here for the final decrease. So I have completed the last decrease of round 27, and now we move to round 28. And in round 28, we are going to do 1 single crochet in each of the next 5 single crochets. So that's our first single crochet. 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we're going to be working an invisible decrease over the following 2 stitches. And we're going to keep repeating this all the way around, and we will end round 28 with our decrease over the last 2 stitches, and I'll meet you back here for the start of round 29. So for round 29, we will do 1 single crochet in each of the next 4 single crochets, and then an invisible decrease. So this will be 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we're going to be doing an invisible decrease over the following 2 stitches. So I'm going to repeat this all the way across till I end round 29, which again should end on a decrease, and I'll meet you back here for round 30. So I've completed round 29, and for round 30 we will now be working 1 single crochet in each of the next 3 single crochets. So this is our first single crochet, 2, and 3, and then I'll be doing an invisible decrease over these 2 stitches, and I'll be repeating that all the way across. So 3 single crochets and a decrease, and I will meet you back here for the start of round 31. So for round 31, we will be working 2 single crochets, 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches, and then we're going to be doing an invisible decrease. And we're going to continue in this manner all the way around. Remember, you should be ending on a decrease over these last 2 stitches. We have now completed round 31. So for the next 3 rounds, which include rounds 32 to 34, we will be working invisible decreases all the way around until we can sew our little opening shut. Okay, so I'll be working those with you now. I'm going to do an invisible decrease here, and I'm still going to place my stitch marker because now that it's all going to be invisible decreases all the way around, it's going to get a little bit difficult for me to tell where I should begin, right? So just going to be doing invisible decreases, and I will meet you back here at the end of round 34. I apologize, we were doing rounds 32 and 33. Those are our final decreases round. And I already completed 32 and I started my round 33. So you can see how tiny this gap is right now. So if you would like, you could just cut your yarn and just kind of weave it shut, but I'm actually going to complete a couple more decreases with you live. So look at that, guys. Technically, there's a mistake in my pattern. Okay, so I completed that decrease, and if you notice, my hole is significantly smaller. So I'm just going to go ahead, remove my stitch marker, and I'm going to cut my yarn and I'm going to weave my end to finish up the hat. So since this is actually a worsted weight yarn instead of a DK weight yarn, that is why I only needed to complete 2 rows of decreases. But I just really wanted to correct that with you guys, because if you're also using a worsted weight yarn, then you will need 1 less row of complete decreases. So I'm just going to weave in the tail end of my yarn, and I will have finished this hat. Unless, of course, I want to add a pom-pom, which I do. You know, I used to be against pom-poms in hats, but now I'm thoroughly enjoying adding pom-poms to hats. Can't explain it. And I just like to weave in as much as possible of the tail end before cutting up my yarn. It's just better. But it is hard when your needles are a little bit on the blunter side, which these are. I prefer darning needles, they're much easier, but this one's all I could find right now. Right, so our tail end is sufficiently woven in, and we have completed our hat. Boom! We've completed it and it's beautiful. We can compare it with the DK weight version, and you will see that this one is just slightly taller, but overall they're the same width. I have to say I actually really like how it came out in this solid color better than the pistachio colorway. This one's feels kind of emptier. This one feels denser, as does this one. But yes, so now it is completely up to you whether or not you want to add a pom-pom to this hat, and I will include pictures at the end of the tutorial so you can see what it looks like on. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment down below, or head over to my blog and also leave a comment, or contact me in any way that you wish to. All the links will be down below, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!